Classical Liberalism. Introduction. In this study session, we will discuss a tradition of political ideas known as classical liberalism. The study session is divided into two sections. Section 1 discusses the historical development of classical liberalism, and Section 2 discusses its central or important principles. When you have studied this session, you should be able to define and use correctly the keywords printed in bold letters. Trace the historical development of classical liberalism in medieval England, and highlights the central principles of classical liberalism. Liberalism refers to those set of ideas and policies that have as their common aim greater freedom or liberty for individual men. Liberals all over the world support policies that permit the free expression of individual personality because they believe that expression is valuable not only to the individual but also to the society. Classical liberalism refers to that version of liberalism that was first developed in England in the medieval period. It is to be distinguished from modern or neoclassical liberalism, which is largely a phenomenon of the 19th and 20th century. While classical liberalism started in the medieval period, modern liberalism started in the 19th century. As already pointed out, classical liberalism developed in medieval England. During this period, men suffered under the dictatorship of absolute monarchy and the church. Men lost faith in their own abilities and looked heavenward to God for the solution to the many problems of human existence. Gradually, however, the use of scientific methods to make improvements in man's material existence led people to begin to develop confidence in their ability to solve many problems which they had previously borne with little complaints. People began to conclude that if technological problems could be solved through the use of human reason, the same could be done with social and political problems. They began to attack monarchical government and the church as institutions which prevented the development of man's ability and abused human dignity. In particular, liberals argue that government was bad if it was given too much power, and therefore that the less power of the government, the better. The revolution, which took place in England in 1688, otherwise called the Glorious Revolution, was the first liberal revolution in human history. The Glorious Revolution was the end product of a long struggle between the king and parliament for dominance in England. The reigning monarch in this period, King James II, who was a Catholic, exercised absolute powers in spite of protests from the parliament and a number of nobles. In June 1687, a group of English nobles sent an invitation to King William of Orange, the ruler of Holland and husband of Mary Stuart, daughter of James II, to rescue England from the tyranny of King James II. William accepted the invitation and came to England with a small army. William was so popularly received in England that James II fled to France. Before allowing William and Mary to ascend the throne jointly as the monarchs of England, the Parliament adopted a document, the Bill of Rights, that limited the power of the English king. The bill guaranteed the Parliament, acting as the representatives of the people, the right to hold free elections, to meet regularly, to make known their views on various issues to the king, and to make laws. The king was not allowed to suspend any law made by Parliament and was prevented from levying taxes or keeping a standing army in peacetime without the approval of Parliament. The Revolution of 1688 was thus a major revolution in that it led to major changes in English government, but was practically bloodless, hence the label the Glorious Revolution. Modern British government developed from this revolution. The powers of the monarchy were steadily reduced until the monarch stopped playing an active role in government and was replaced by a prime minister elected from Parliament. This is the story of the first liberal revolution in human history. Principles of classical liberalism. In the previous section, we discussed the circumstances that led to the development of classical liberalism. In this section, we shall identify the major ideas or principles associated with classical liberalism and classical liberals. Human reason. The most important principle of classical liberalism is faith in human reason. Classical liberals were optimistic about the ability of human beings to solve their problems or improve their existence through the use of human reason. Natural laws. Classical liberals believed that just as there were scientific laws, so also there were certain rules of nature governing human conduct that could be discovered through the use of human reason and utilized to improve human existence. These rules were called natural law. Natural rights and liberties. Classical liberals argued that natural law guaranteed to each individual certain rights that could not be legally taken away without due process of law. John Locke, history's leading classical liberal, identified three of these rights, namely the rights to life, liberty, and property. The principle of individual equality was very important in classical liberalism. Classical liberals argued that no individual is more human than the next or had greater claim on life, liberty, and property than anyone else. The argument here was not that all people were equal in all ways. Classical liberals recognized that people could differ in intelligence, physical ability, and so on. Classical liberals, however, insisted that in spite of differences in human ability, all people had the same natural rights. We have pointed out that John Locke identified three natural rights of man, namely life, liberty, and property. He and many other classical liberals attached great importance to the right to private property because of two reasons. One, they argued that possession of private property allowed people to provide for themselves and their families the basic necessities of life. Once they were able to satisfy these basic necessities, man could turn to the task of developing their character or human qualities. The possession of private property frees men from the pressures of daily survival, thereby allowing them to develop their human qualities. 2. The classical liberals also argued that private property is an extension of man's personality. They argued that when people applied their labor to produce or acquire private property, they transferred something of themselves into it. Therefore, private property is important because it embodies the personality of its owner. Economic liberty or free enterprise economy. Classical liberal economists like Adam Smith and David Ricardo argued for the extension of liberalism to economic sphere. They argued that the production of goods and services should be left to private individuals and groups whose activities will be regulated by impersonal market forces, such as the forces of supply and demand. The government should not interfere with the market forces because such intervention is likely to hamper free competition and efficiency in the production of goods and services. Government as defender of private property. In line with the importance which they attached to private property, classical liberals argue that a primary function of government was to defend or protect men's right to private property. Government cannot therefore take away the private property of an individual except when it is very clear that a man's possession of property has hampered the natural rights of another. Parliamentary rule. Classical liberals argue that people should be governed by parliament elected by citizens who owned property and were therefore free from the ordinary pressures of survival. Those elected by parliament are representatives of the people, and they should take decisions which reflect the preferences or interests of the people who elected them. Classical liberals argue that Parliament, which was the direct agent of the people, should exercise more powers than the monarchy. Indeed, they argue that the Parliament should decide on policies, while the monarch should execute or carry out the directives or policies of Parliament. Right of rebellion. Classical liberals argue that government should never become more powerful than the people it serves. All just powers of government were given to it by the people, and the government should serve the people, rather than the people serving the government. Hence, if government tried to oppress the people or to interfere too much in their affairs, then the people had the right to remove that government and to create a new one that would serve them better. Read pages 57 to 65 of Baradat's Political Ideologies for more discussion of the principles of classical liberalism. See also the article on John Locke on pages 67 to 80 of David Thompson's Political Ideas, as well as the section on classical liberalism on pages 63 and 64 of Rudi and others, Introduction to Political Science. As you study the materials, try to identify any additional 2 or more principles that you think are related to classical liberalism. Study Session Summary. Classical liberalism developed in medieval England and achieved a major success in 1688 when the Glorious Revolution put an end to monarchical absolutism in England. The major principles associated with classical liberalism are faith in human reason, natural law, natural rights and liberties, equality of individuals, importance of private property, economic liberty, government as defender of private property, parliamentary rule, supremacy of parliament over monarchy, and rights of the people to remove an oppressive government. We have now come to the end of study session 5. Thank you for listening.